The main sort of ethical and moral issues around geoengineering that I see, and basically from the perspective of someone who works in a development agency, is around the equity or the fairness of who wins and loses in this debate. Do the rich get richer and the powerful get more powerful and the poor get poorer and placed in perhaps more vulnerable situations? There's also the whole business, not business, the issue, I suppose. I work for a faith-based agency, so God is quite an important character in the work we do. And I think geoengineering raises the issue of what right we have to manipulate God's creation. So I think that's a really, really important one from our perspective. Who has rights over the atmosphere? When do we draw the line and say, actually, we've gone too far? It's a hugely important issue, and it's something that we'll continue to wrestle with. And then, I suppose, to continue that is who's considering the rights of nature in this whole debate. Yes, geoengineering may create certain solutions to the problem in terms of humanity, but what about all the other species that share this fragile planet? I mean, there are many examples, I won't go, of where we will actually manipulate nature in a way which may be detrimental to a whole host of species. So I think, as I say, the main issue around the fairness, around the religious aspects of it, and in terms of the purely environmental aspects. I mean, simply, it's like, should we do it? I think we're at that very difficult point, in a sense, in human history, where we realise we've done something pretty silly with the atmosphere. We've changed the composition of the atmosphere, as I said before, inadvertently, but we're now at that point where we're having to make some pretty serious decisions. And as Copenhagen proved, the big conference during, last December, there really isn't the political and economic will to take concerted action to address this problem. If that's the case, we're probably looking at a temperature rise, which some scientists believe will be catastrophic. So we're at that awful point where we have to make a decision whether we continue along this path, which could lead to catastrophic climate change, or we start to look at geoengineering solutions. So I think the big decision is, when do we decide that we have to make that decision? Understandably, with the research, in a sense, it could be argued that it's important to start the research now, so that if we do get to that point where we're seeing tipping points and we have to use it, then at least it's there. I think the big concern for me is, as I have mentioned, but it's this whole thing of that this problem wasn't created with malice aforethought. You know, our ancestors, you know, through the Industrial Revolution, didn't do this with intent. You know, that's a very important point. And for me, that means that climate change in the past isn't so much an issue of justice. As soon as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change pretty much said this, you know, we are pretty certain that human activities are leading to, you know, changing the composition of the atmosphere and leading to a warming, I think from that day on, this became an ethical issue. It's around justice. What we're seeing at the moment is a world which is already inequitable and unjust. And those people who are going to be first and worst impacted are already the most, well, they are the most vulnerable. Now, with geoengineering, is it going to change anything about that world, the world we inhabit, the inequities that are already there? They aren't. The big challenge I would put to the researchers, whoever they may be, is to make sure that this research does consider those inequities, because they are likely to be compounded. As I say, this is a perfect way for some companies, some governments to make a large sum of money And I think that has to be addressed early on. Where do the benefits, who benefits, who loses?